they were saying, you're worthless, you're useless, you're stupid, you're broken, you're never going to be anything.
Emily, how did you find Carnivore?
So, Carnivore found me through my brother. My brother reached out to me and knew that I was suffering with mental illness. And he told me about the carnivore diet, and something within me just had this knowing. I knew that this was the solution that I had been looking for. And I didn't think it would completely resolve all of my mental illness, but I thought at least it would help. And so he told me about Amber O'Hearn's story, and she had resolved bipolar disorder 10 years previous to then. That was in 2019. And all I knew was that there was a chance that it could help me. So February 24th of 2019, I just started eating animal meat and animal fat. And my last symptom of mental illness was in April of 2019. So yeah, that's my story.
Wow, that's fast.
Yeah.
So, were you? I know you said you kind of knew that this was what would work for you, but were you kind of surprised that things did progress as quickly as they did?
Yeah, it was very foreign to me to have any positive feelings. I was just used to terrible and then a new pile of terrible and then a little bit of horrible. Like I wasn't used to experiencing joy or peace or mental clarity. And so it was very foreign. I think it was the end of the third week, so about 4 weeks in, that I experienced just like a little glimpse of joy. And I was just like, what is this? Like, what is this feeling? What is this experience? And then it just progressively got more and more until at the end of April, I just was having every day was a good day.
Right. And so that means that you basically lived your entire life under this cloud of mental illness. Like you were literally experiencing this for the first time.
Yeah, the only relief I had prior to then was mania with the bipolar disorder, and that always came with a crash. So mania was fine while it was happening, but then afterwards, I would see the path of destruction through failed marriages, through lost jobs, through lost relationships, through friends. And of course, overspending. I would, have maxed out all my credit cards and sold everything to just have some crazy dream. And so that was the only time that I had any relief, and it wasn't exactly relief because it was uh, mania.
Wow. And so you would go through these periods of like as you mentioned destruction. So it's like the spending and things like that. That was kind of a subconscious attempt to soothe or something?
I'm sure that that was. But with bipolar disorder, your perspective on reality just kind of shifts, and you just you don't see things in the right way. And so I always liken it to a lens where it's not that the situation in your life changes, it's that the lens that you see it through changes. And so with bipolar disorder, it's either like down in depression or it's up in mania. And so whenever I was in mania, I would be like, screw it all. I'm going to go buy, these $100 boots or whatever, like I would just go out and spend all this money or, um, just make really bad choices financially, and relationally. And it was a path of destruction for sure.
And I imagine it's pretty exhausting having those shifts as well.
Yeah, because I came to the place where I didn't trust myself, where I would, be in a kind of good state where I would be in between the mania and the depression. And I'd be like, okay, I'm going to have a new game plan and I'm going to do this. And it was like, you can't fool yourself. And so in the back of my mind, I'm like, yeah, right. You're not going to do that. You say you're going to do that, but you're not going to do that. You've failed at everything you've ever done. You've never followed through. So I didn't believe myself and I didn't trust myself, that I could rely on myself.
And so 3 months in, you get this first glimpse of joy,
Three
and
weeks,
3 weeks. Sorry, sorry,
the
sorry.
end of the
Three
third week.
weeks. Wow. And so end of the third week, you get your first glimpse of joy, and then things just progress from there. Just things start getting better and better. And like when you think about kind of bouncing between depression and mania, it just becomes more kind of you get to be more in the middle all the time.
Yeah, and the joy, like I said, it started with just 10 minutes. And then the next day it was 15 minutes. And then it became my all day, every day. And I had never experienced that because I always had this like doom and gloom. It was either mania or it was depression. And so for me to feel good on a normal day walking through the grocery store, it was just like, what am I happy about? Why am I happy right now? I'm literally walking through the grocery store. Like there's nothing exciting about this, but I just had this overall lift in my mood and in my joy. And it just carried me through, as long as I kept eating animal meat and animal fat.
Wow. I think that's when you experience that kind of feeling when there's no stimulus to actually give you that, when it's not, oh, I just won the lottery, or I'm just about to go and buy a new outfit or whatever it is, it's just, yeah, oh, look, lettuce. It's when you just see something in the shop or you're just walking around the shop and it's like you feel great. That's a sign that things are really changing, right?
Yeah, and I think it's also important to recognize it the other way, that a lot of times people think, if this would change, I would feel better. If my husband wouldn't say this, or if my wife wouldn't say this, or if my finances were different. Nothing in my circumstances changed, but my perspective. The lens that I was looking through changed, not my circumstances. And so I think so many times we focus so much on, if he wasn't such an idiot, I would have a happier life. Or if this, but it's not, it's your perspective. And that's what changes whenever I remove the sugar and the processed food from the inflammation from my brain.
Wow. Um, and so this is, I'm just looking at the dates again, February 2019. And it's been consistent up until now. Like, how have you been feeling this whole time? It's just better and better and better, or?
It was, yes. It was for over 5 years, 5+ years. And I had no depression, no, mania, nothing. And then at some point in 2023, I decided to reincorporate or reintroduce honey, because I thought that honey was, carnivore because it's from bees. But I did not address my underlying food addiction. And I quickly found out that I could not eat honey in a sober manner. And unfortunately, I wasn't eating healthy honey. I was eating honey out of the grocery store that was very, very low quality. So it's probably pretty close to just corn syrup, to be honest. It was just trash honey. And I was eating copious amounts. because I hadn't dealt with that, imbalance in me. And unfortunately, there was about 6 months of me just like binge eating honey. And then I started going into psychosis. And for most people that don't know what psychosis is, it's basically an altered reality where if you kind of liken it to like schizophrenia, where they're seeing things or hearing things that are not there. And so I was receiving messages and hearing things that were not true. Like at one point, I thought I was a mermaid. And so anybody else would be like, Emily, this isn't true, but it was very true to me. It was very real. Like if you would have given me a lie detector test, I'd been like, yeah, I'm a mermaid. Like I am. I just know that I am. And so thankfully, I have hundreds of YouTube videos that my family has watched, and they have been educated on my mental illness, and they've also been educated on how to help me. So my friends and my family actually got together and had a meeting, and they sat me down in front of some fatty beef brisket and a big old glass of water, and I snapped out of it. So in a not great scenario, I would have been taken to the psych ward and then put on medication for who knows how long. But thankfully, my family knew, okay, this isn't Emily. What's going on? They didn't know I had been closetly eating honey, but they knew to give me fatty animal meat, and I was able to pull out of the psychosis. And thankfully, it went away, and I didn't have to experience that anymore.
Wow. And like it going away, was that almost instant or was that a period of time?
I would say within 4 hours of eating, and it was a lot. It was a 2 pounds of fatty animal meat, and I had been in psychosis for like 3 days. So we found out that I hadn't eaten or slept in 3 days. And so it was a big shock to my system to get the fatty animal meat. So it immediately like went to my brain, was the blanket that I needed, and it just calmed my central nervous system down enough for me to come back into reality. And I even was sitting there with my family, my father, and I said, I think I just went through psychosis. And he was like, yeah, you think? And so they were able to, go through that with me, and thankfully love me, instead of judge me through that.
It's interesting because if someone had told me a story like this even 5 years ago, I'd probably be, yeah, it's probably not the food, it's probably something else, right? But now I realize, like, the stuff, and like you say, this was probably just, it was low quality. It's probably just like corn syrup, right? Um, so knowing what I know now, it's like, well, this makes sense. This stuff is on a register that's like says it's generally recognized as safe, right? But that just means they have no hard evidence that this is doing damage, right? But basically it's poison. It's manufactured stuff, right? And if we're
Well,
putting this into our body, no wonder we get all these weird reactions to it because you would if you put any other poison into your body, right?
yeah, and well, normal people who are not predisposed to mental illness would be fine. It's just to know my poison, to know that this is a dangerous thing for me, that I am predisposed to mental illness, and that I have those pathways in my brain. And so I cannot incite that. And it wasn't just the honey. The honey was the precursor, But once I got into the messages and I was getting these basically this false reality, I was given the message to bond with my grandfather who had passed away, and that the best way for me to bond with him would be to go and drink Coca-Cola because my grandfather worked for Coca-Cola. And so for 6 days, I ate nothing, and I would go to the gas station and I would get the largest fountain Coca-Cola. And to go from such a clean diet of fatty animal meat to nothing but soda, it just triggered my whole system and just continued me into this spiral. And then another day I had KFC, which I haven't had any seed oils or any carbs or anything. And I had an entire meal of KFC, and then another meal I had biscuits from McDonald's. So it was the honey. The honey was started it, and then it was the soda, and then the KFC, and then the biscuits, and then thankfully that's whenever my family stepped in and said, "Okay." Like, and they even had to ask me, like, "Hey, what have you been eating?" And I told them, and they were like, "Oh, okay." Like, they didn't know. And so they were like, "Oh, okay. Like, Emily, you can't drink soda. You can't eat all of these foods." And so thankfully the fatty animal meat pulled me out.
Yeah. And I guess they obviously they really noticed the change because this was so dramatic. You've gone from eating nothing bad to like suddenly everything's bad.
Yeah, and I had even kept the honey like a secret. Like nobody like knew that I was like eating copious amounts of honey. And so to their defense, like they had no idea until it was all exacerbated into full-blown psychosis.
And so that day when you had the first, they sat you down and said, "Have the fatty beef." When was that?
Um, it was a while back. I don't want to say specific dates because I have clients that I don't want them to feel like, but it was only 3 days that I was incapacitated. So it was sometime this year in 2024.
And so everything's back to normal now. Everything's all good now.
Yeah, it actually got a little bit worse. And the psychosis was gone. So everything was stable there. And thankfully, I was eating just fatty animal meat. I haven't had any problem with the honey because I don't touch it. And I literally eat burgers and ribeyes and beef brisket, and that's it, and water. And then my body had to process all those toxins. And I got a full blown urinary tract infection and a kidney infection and ended up in the hospital. And the problem with that was that the only way to get the infection out of my body was to take 2 rounds of antibiotics, and that wiped out my gut biome. And so the mania and the psychosis was really not that unbearable. It was kind of, I was in my own little world. What was treacherous was after the antibiotics, I had depression for a year or a month and a half. And that was torturous because I had been free of depression for 5+ years. And I was still just eating fatty animal meat. And so I was like, I don't know what to do. And then I found this video from Dr. William Davis about L-reuteri yogurt, and I learned how to rebuild my gut biome with L-reuteri yogurt. It's just a microbe. And within 4 days, my depression was gone.
And so this yogurt, like, it's different to the average kind of supermarket yogurt you would get.
Yes, it's something that you have to make at home because traditional yogurt, they only cook it for 4 hours. And this yogurt, you have to put the microbe in there and then you cook it at 99 degrees for 36 hours. And so what that does is that like multiplies the microbe, and then it gets into your system whenever you eat that. I only eat 6 ounces every day. It's like medicine. Like I just eat that as my medicine. And they have so many stories. If you just go and put L-reuteri yogurt in YouTube, there are so many stories of people that it helps rebuild their gut biome and to lift the depression. But I was so scared because I was like, I don't know what else to do. I'm already eating fatty animal meat, but with the 2 rounds of antibiotics, it wiped out my gut biome. And so I just had to rebuild it with the L-reuteri.
And so today, things are you're feeling good. Everything's you're taking that little bit of yogurt every day. And how else are you eating day to day?
Yeah, I still just eat burgers and beef brisket and ribeyes. And then I have the 6 ounces of the yogurt every night. Um, but what I've found is that it's given me just such a rejuvenation of my compassion for people. And I knew as soon as this happened to me that it was a gift for me to be able to make sure and tell people depression's a real thing. It's not in your head, and it's not just like, oh, think happy thoughts. Like it is like a completely different experience. And what was so funny was when I went into the depression, it was the same messages that happened 5 plus years ago in 2019. They were saying you're worthless, you're useless, you're stupid, you're broken, you're never going to be anything. And I had enough under my belt of this 5.5 years, 5 plus years, that I was like, nope, that's not true. That's not true. That's not who I am. And so that was a much different experience because I knew that there was going to be an end to this. I just didn't know how.
You touched on something that resonates with me there is like when people are around you are just saying things to you like, just think happy thoughts. It's, I mean, I think, especially when I was in high school, I think I had some level of mild depression, right? And nothing would irritate me more than when my father would say to me, just snap out of it. It's so annoying because like if I could, believe me, I would. It's not that simple.
No. And what that tells me is that they have no point of reference. And I'm thankful. I'm so thankful that they have no clue what it's like to experience true depression. It's not situational. Like I said, it has nothing to do with the circumstances. It has everything to do with that lens and that cloud and that heaviness, that it doesn't matter what you do because nothing is enjoyable. Even your favorite activities, your favorite movies, your favorite people, like nothing has that luster in life. And so for people to say, oh, well, you've got nothing to be depressed about, just, you don't know. You don't know what it's like.
So, have you taken your experiences and you're actually helping people with similar things now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been helping people um, uh, doing coaching for 5 plus years, but now that I have this latest episode that I went through, I was able to return to some of my clients and be like, man, I forgot how bad this is. I forgot how unsettling, psychosis is, because you can't even trust your own reality. You don't even trust your own brain. And then the depression, it's just so dark and it's so endless. And to experience it 24/7 is just, it like just sucks the life out of you. There's nothing more draining than depression. And so I've been able to, just really meet my clients where they're at and just be like, man, okay, let's get a game plan. Like, let's figure this out because I don't want anyone to suffer like that again.
And it's so important that you can actually meet people where they are and empathize with them and understand what they're going through because yeah, when when you have no point of reference, it's very, very difficult to help people because you don't know how they're suffering, right? But when you've been there, you can really empathize.
Yeah. And the classic therapist would say, so how does that make you feel? And I can say, I know how that makes you feel. And then it's so funny because when people first meet me for a session, they'll say something and then I'll expound and I'll be like, oh yeah. And then you start second guessing yourself and then you have this and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, you really know. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, I really know. It sucks. It's absolute torture being in that mental illness hell.
So, do you find that for most people you're working with, it's just about diet, or do they have to do a little bit of work in the way they're thinking about things?
I think it starts with diet. I won't work with anybody if they are still just, eating copious amounts of Oreos and Doritos and ramen noodles and pizza and beer and wine because like we're literally just running on a hamster wheel. We're not going to be able to get anywhere. But once we can start, even just a little bit, start to remove the sugar and the processed foods, then we can reduce that inflammation in their brain. And then we can start talking about the childhood traumas, the relational traumas, the self sabotage, and kind of the root cause of why we're here. But we have to start with the food. It's in my opinion, it's critical to any kind of mental health.
And so, people getting good results.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been absolutely incredible. I haven't had one person work with me who hasn't had an improvement in their mental health and notice, significant improvement of symptoms, even with their autoimmune disease and their joints and aches and pains and all that stuff.
Oh, very nice. And well, speaking of the joints and the aches and pains, we did you suffer from any of that kind of thing before?
Yes, definitely. Before in 2019, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And that was debilitating. I mean, at one point, I couldn't walk without an assistive device. I was popping like 800 milligrams of ibuprofen a day just to get out of bed because every joint hurt. And then I got like the nerve pain and everything. And then that all resolved May 9th of 2019. So, eating fatty animal meat, and I haven't had any relapse of symptoms for MMS. That was one thing my family we were happy about. That even though the honey and the soda and the KFC, thank God my MS did not come back. Yeah, I'm really grateful that that's gone.
Wow. And so, in relation to the MS, had you been for any testing for the MS before? And like, for example, did you have any lesions? And have you found that those lesions are gone or reduced in size? Or
Yeah, so my story is a little bit interesting because I started eating carnivore February 24th of 2019. I was hospitalized March 12th with multiple sclerosis. All of a sudden, my throat stopped swallowing. And so they went and they did MRIs and they found the lesions on my brain. And then they did a lumbar puncture and they did all the testing and they diagnosed me with multiple sclerosis. So a logical person would say, I started this all meat diet and now I can't walk, I can't talk, I can't swallow. But I had a knowing within me that I knew that if this is inflammation, that's what autoimmune disease is inflammation, then I'm on the right track. I just got to keep eating fatty animal meat. And it was a gamble, but it was the best gamble of my life because my next MRI was a month later and my lesions reduced by 50%. And I've had 6 MRIs now. My last MRI showed no new MS activity. I haven't had symptoms since May 9th of 2019. I can do CrossFit. I can do yoga. I can run around and do anything I want with my body.
That's awesome. And yeah, you know, that's the thing you automatically jump to, right? A month ago, I started eating only meat. Of course, it's the meat. It's the same, you know, someone goes carnivore and has a heart attack and they blame the carnivore. It's not the 30 years of smoking and alcohol consumption and processed foods that did it. It's the month of meat.
Yeah, and I got a chance to meet with Sally K. Norton, and we were talking about oxalates, and I just had this like aha moment, and I was like, "Oh, that's what happened. My body was oxalate dumping, and that's why the MS flared." And because actually, if I look back, I had symptoms of MS for 10 years prior to my actual diagnosis. The doctors just kept saying, "Oh, it's just old age." Like nobody knew that it was MS until it exacerbated. And then it really reared its ugly head. And so I talked to Sally and I'm like, "Do you think that my MS could have been oxalate dumping?" She was like, "Duh." It was like, "Oh, okay, okay." So it's not that the carnivore diet caused the MS, it was that it pulled back the curtain and revealed the MS. And so I was actually grateful. I'm glad that I was able to know now what I was dealing with, and then thankfully just keep eating fatty animal meat.
Well, I mean, the last 6 years have been very busy for you when you look back. Wow. Wow. But it's so awesome that you've got to this side of things and you're also able to help other people with similar kinds of issues.
Yeah, and it was a little bit scary when I went through the psychosis because it's one thing to say that you've experienced depression or mental illness, but to admit publicly that you've experienced psychosis for 3 days and you didn't know who you were and you thought you were a mermaid, like I think it's dangerous, that people would think that, oh, well, she's lost her mind. But thankfully, I don't care about those people. Those people are not my audience. My audience are the people who have gone through psychosis, the people who are suffering with mental illness, to give them a voice to say, it's okay that you can't trust your mind. Try this. Like, let's go over here. Let's try and get away from the Oreos and the Doritos and all the stuff, and to really give them hope that they don't have to just stay in that mental illness forever, because this has been 6 months since I've experienced this, and before that it was years. So I know that there's something to eating fatty animal meat and supporting my mental health.
So, how can people reach out to you, Emily, if they want to talk to you about something, or perhaps want to take advantage of your coaching?
Yeah, just go to emilypenton.com and all of my information's there. I even have a thing that says my email address, and you guys can find me there.
Awesome. So yeah, I'll link to your website below. Emily, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience with us. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dave. And this is actually the first interview I have done talking about the psychosis and the depression. And I knew that this would be a good soft start for me because I knew that I would feel safe in your presence. And so thank you so much for the space that you create on YouTube for us to share our stories. I appreciate you.